some questions at the back. The first thing I've got to say, just before I forget, having heard just what John said, we go to the breast care clinic, and we're talking about biopsies. If they'd seen a young woman with what looks suspiciously like a serious and malignant cancer, they could, under Stafford's previous regime, have taken that biopsy and got it back the same afternoon. Now it's a fortnight if you're lucky. That's the difference between life and death with an aggressive cancer in a young woman. So even to pretend that that is in any way an equivalent service, frankly, is disgraceful. To be reassured by anything Mark Hackett says shows that you haven't read the summary to the KPMG report. Because it actually talks about a management culture where things are said and then a different thing is done. If that hasn't got Mark Hackett's initials all over it, I'm a Dutchman. Yeah. So, here are the observations. I'm not reassured that this is an NHS England report and the government's fingers aren't all over it. I'm sorry, I'm not reassured. Because when Cameron was being pressed to publish this, he could have said, this is nothing to do with me. I will ask NHS to publish it. I really think they should. Did he? No, he didn't. The government's fingers are all over this report. End of. And the only way to disprove that is for him to stand up and say so. And he doesn't. Why has this not been published? Well, there's a story. Because NHS England and the government are working so closely together. And what you have to understand, and I would have thought you would know it, Jeremy, is that when things are done in secrecy, that promotes a culture of fear. And if anybody knows about that, Stafford does. Because we've been governed on the mushroom principle for 3 years. Shovel shit on them and keep them in the dark. The robustness of my language, but I honestly don't think anything else will do. As we have heard, there is a fine history here of reports from here, there and everywhere. Fine words about how nothing's going to happen, and the next thing you know, it happens. So please don't expect anybody who hears about a report that has been suppressed when others have been published to be anything other than scared witless. And to accuse us of scaremongering, frankly, is disgraceful. Because everything that we have said so far has damned well come to pass. If this really was nothing that we should be afraid of, why did not NHS England say straight away, well, we've commissioned this report, it costs God knows how many millions of pounds of your taxpayers' money, we're going to do this bit of it, and we're chucking that bit in the bin. They didn't. And remember, NHS England, in the person of its leader, Mr. Simon Stevens, was invited by support staff at the hospital, getting on for 6 months ago to discuss with us. He hasn't even given us the courtesy of a reply, despite 3 further follow-up telephone calls, because he's far too busy. Far too busy looking at this? I don't know. So, the fact that this report has been commissioned and then kept secret can do nothing but create fear. There's no 2 ways about it. A culture of secrecy leads to disbelief and distrust. And remember, you're talking to the group who knew what the TSA recommendations were and have seen far beyond that taken out of their hospital. We were there only this week. It is a husk, quite frankly. It is a husk. Do I feel safe in Stafford now? No, I don't. Because we don't have anything even approaching a proper A&E. Do I feel safe having to get to Stoke? Well, if you live in Nosal, well, take your sleeping bag, because God knows how long it's going to take you. It's absolutely appalling. So that's why we are where we are. The KPMG report is done by accountants, and they've come up with a wonderful accountant solution. Oh, patients and beds cost money, well, let's get rid of some beds. That is an accountant solution. They're just concerned about the bottom line. It takes no account of the fact that the University Hospital at Stoke already has 100 fewer beds than the health economy had before it. And now they're talking about closing more. Do me a favour. We're talking about building at least 500 homes a year in Staffordshire and another 10,000 over the plan of the local plan. You cannot possibly think that is satisfactory. Let's have a look at the contents of the report. And this is where it gets interesting. I'm not even going to look at the land and the issue about for sale. That will come or it won't. I can't do anything about it. But there's plenty in here about management. Or perhaps I ought to say lack of management. If this was an Ofsted report into a school, there would have been in special measures and the head teacher would have been out the door on Friday afternoon. What does it actually say? It talks about a culture of doublespeak. It talks about a culture of meetings, where one thing is said and another thing is done. It talks about a culture of bullying emails. There's no other word for it. And many of us have been in meetings where we've seen that bullying culture in action. It talks about things only improving when certain figures leave the building. It talks about every other leader in the CCG and in the university hospitals having to basically go to leadership school to be taught how to do it. And yet nobody's thought to action any of these articles. Because until some of those things are done, this is not going to improve. Between Hackett and the CCG, the people of Stafford are well blessed, I have to tell you. So there are certain aspects of this report which ought to have been actioned straight away. And that leads on to another question. We were told that the TSA had to come into Stafford because we were clinically and financially unsustainable. Well, there can't be many places a lot more financially unsustainable than Stoke. And as for its clinical record, how many more weeks does it have to languish as either the worst hospital in Britain or the bottom three? And yet the government is strangely silent. Nobody says a word about standards. Nobody talks about sending in anybody to sort things out. Is it any wonder that people here don't trust a word that is said? So my questions are these. Why has the government taken no action about the appalling standards of A&E delivery at Stoke, given that they have been in the bottom three for more months than I can care to mention? And why are those recommendations about the management of the wider health economy, i.e. the CCG and Stoke, not being mentioned?
That was a brilliant analysis, really an extremely good question. So firstly, on the question of the A&E at Stoke, as far as I know, because we raise this on a regular basis, all the local MPs, which includes me, they are very concerned about it, or the whole NHS is, and indeed the government, because as you rightly says, it has at the moment the poorest 4-hour wait record in the country, and 12-hour, yeah, absolutely. The things that, for instance, beds at Longton Cottage Hospital are being reopened, which should never have been closed. That's one aspect. There's a real problem in, I think, the way in which Stoke deals with the Royal Stoke Hospital deals with A&E is slightly different from other hospitals. And they're looking at that, and what they do is they tend to treat more in A&E. In other places, people will be triaged straight from A&E onto a ward. In Stoke, they try to do more within A&E, and they're certainly looking at that. But that's a practice that has been a practice that's been there for some time. On the issue of the bed. Well, on the issue of the beds, let me say, my wife trained as a junior doctor at Stoke in the 1980s, and it was under great pressure even then as the North Staffs Royal Infirmary in the City General. So it then was 1,200 beds. Under the PFI it came down to 950, and there is no doubt the PFI was too small. There are extra beds being put in now, but even so, it is a problem, and it will continue to be a problem. So, yeah. So sorry, I'm trying to get I'm trying to get over, because I'm not an expert on this particular issue, on the technicalities of A&E, but you asked me what they're doing about it, and those are some of the actions that are being taken. But what we can do is we can get I can ask again on Monday. We can get a full report as to what is being done, because I know Magnus Harrison, who runs the A&E and the whole hospital, is extremely concerned about that. The whole local health economy is very concerned about it. The second issue was about the culture and what's been done about that. And I don't think it's right, I don't think it's probably fair to point fingers at individuals among the whole health economy. Let's not forget they were looking right across the whole of Staffordshire, including at Burton, right across to Tamworth. But there is a real problem, which you've seen and you've highlighted and identified, with the way in which, as the report says, a meeting culture, where people don't get out onto the wards enough, don't get out to see what's really going on. There is a real problem in the maybe some of the sort of interpersonal relationships of that. I wouldn't say that's peculiar to Staffordshire. It's certainly something that I've heard from other parts of the country. Is it being worked on? I've raised that question. It is being worked on. We'll have to see what the results are. But I think the most important thing is that in the report it is absolutely clear that that is something that needs to be dealt with. And it's the first time that it's come out in the open, and come out in the open now because it's been leaked. It should have been published, but it's been leaked in a way which means that it's got to happen. It's got to be addressed.
Three quick responses
to
that. Firstly, if anything, I underplayed the criticisms which lie within this report. I'll read you one single sentence. The lack of a single strategic plan across the local health economy has reinforced the silo working culture. This is still in evidence with NHS commissioners and pursuing market tenders for services that do not always appear to have the full support of all commissioners or be linked to a clear long-term strategy. Well, cancer not for profit, cancer and end-of-life care, anybody? Let's not even talk about it. Secondly, if Stafford had been doing anything like the things which Stoke had been doing, we would have been held out to dry. Oh, hang on. We were held out to dry. But if this isn't a matter of, oh, we'll ask for this or we'll ask for that, why is that hospital not subject to the same degree of scrutiny that we have been subject to? We didn't deserve it. My own uncle, at 80-odd, before Christmas, was sent to the hospital, having had a fall. He had terminal melanoma. He was on a trolley for 12 hours before they found him a bed to die in. That is not the fault of the staff. It is the fault of management. And it ought to be dealt with in a far more robust way. And finally, if you really want to cure this hole in the finances, scrub the PFI debt. That's it, job done at a stroke.